Do you think there are any advantages to college? I did go to college. You went to UCLA. I mean, I don't regret that I went, but I don't think the classes that I took at college like serve me today. But,
yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, there's a, like, I loved my college experience, but not necessarily for the classes that I went through. I loved my college experience for a lot of reasons. College did teach me how to learn. I got very efficient at learning because I was actually doing so many things. I was in Air Force ROTC. I was getting an engineering degree. I was president of a fraternity, and I was doing all these things at the same time. So I got really good at learning how to learn. Sure. So I look back and I'm like, did college work for me? Yes, but not in the way that I thought it would.
Right. We thought the degree was going to prepare us.
I thought the degree was going to get me there.
To start a company or to work at a company. But
I think that's
other things like how to do dishes, set your alarm clock, take care of yourself, make friends.
100%. Exactly, like how to interact with people and you know, those sorts of things. But I think, you know, for me, I mentioned to people, I'm like, college does serve. I'm not saying we should get rid of college. College does serve a purpose, right? If you want to become a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or something like that, like you can't not go through that process.
Or if you want to go into massive debt.
Yeah, that too. But my beef is that it forces most people to make that decision at a very early age without really putting in the work to get clear. So, for example, I have a handful of friends of mine who went to UCLA and ended up becoming doctors. I'd say there's about 5 of them that ended up going through UCLA and ended up becoming doctors. Now, I can confidently tell you right now that only 2 of the 5 really, really love being a doctor, and it should be what they do for the rest of their life. 3 of the 5, I can tell you right now, want to do something else. But because just like you mentioned, they're $500,000 in debt, and at this point, 15 years worth of schooling into it, you kind of built your own grave, right? So
it's a lot of hours too. I mean, really, it seems like the only way to get some freedom out of it is to start your own practice and get a couple partners and wind down a little.
You know, there's a reason that physician burnout is such a big issue. It's because, you know, people make great money as physicians, but a lot of people after that much schooling and when they finally really understand what it is that they want, but they're already 15 years of schooling and however many hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt into it, you kind of have to see it through. Right. And so at that point, you're not doing anything that you really care about. You're not doing anything because you love what you do. Right. And like I mentioned, you know, it's about a 50-50, like 50% of the people that do it, like it's where they need to be. But then there's the other 50% that did it because, like me as an engineer, they were good at math or they were good at sciences and they were told this by their parents that they should go down this route. Right. And that's not healthy. This is one of the reasons that so much of our society is unhappy or suffering from anxiety and depression and stress. You know, Forbes did a study. I can't remember the exact numbers, but Forbes did a study and it's something like 83% of people who are in the workplace right now are either disconnected, unhappy, stressed out, or depressed in their 9-to-5s. Like 4 out of 5 people. It's crazy.
I believe you. I was there myself. My world record for lasting at a job was 9 months. I happened like 4 times, wound up quitting every time. And I didn't get as successful as you in the corporate
but I think,
world.
To me, I think that's a blessing.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
I was just sitting in a cubicle looking outside. It was dark when I got to work and it was dark when I was time to go home. I'm like, I just missed the whole day.
Yeah. I was so dangerously close to getting stuck in the 9-to-5 world for the rest of my life because I actually, I could be there. I was getting raises and promotions faster than every one of my friends. I was on deck to be one of the youngest directors in Cisco's recent history. I didn't have it was all laid out in front of me. I wasn't in a dead end job.
Right.
I had the path. And that was probably the scariest part.
That's a whole nother conversation is like the 9-to-5. Because now I'm like, did I just build myself a 9-to-5 by starting this business? Because I'm finding more freedom through actually having more structure. But it's still, I'm setting up the structure and I can plan for when I want days off or trips or vacations. And it's a whole nother ball game, really. But
yeah, I feel that, man.
So what would you say is one of the top things that you learned that you did not learn in college, but that you learned later that you'd love to share with the listeners?
You know, I think we kind of hit on it, but I think the number one thing is clarity. right? So there's a lot of stuff, but I think the number one thing is like, you got to get clear on what you actually want in life, right? And so whenever I tell this to people, the way that I explain it, I explain like clarity as like a jigsaw puzzle, right? So imagine this. Imagine you started driving and you hit like a fork in the road and you go, well, do I turn left or do I turn right? What's the answer? Well, the answer is, where are you trying to get to, right? Because depending on where you're trying to get to will dictate whether or not you turn left or turn right. So most people can't make decisions in their life because they don't know where they're trying to get to. They're literally just wandering through life, hoping to get somewhere good, hoping to get somewhere fulfilling and fun. And that brings them purpose and fulfillment and happiness. So the first thing is you have to get clear on like, what kind of life do you want? Like, what do you want to live? What do you want to accomplish? And that piece is daunting to a lot of people because everybody's like, Zander, like, how do I ever discover my life purpose? And what I tell people is it's a lot like a jigsaw puzzle. So there's different conversations with mentors and exercises that you can do to get extreme clarity on who you are as a person, what brings you joy, the ideal life that you want to live. And then, each one of these can be like a big piece of a jigsaw puzzle. When you do several of them, you start to get to see the clearer picture. Now, the big issue is that most people think that they're going to find these jigsaw puzzle pieces like while you're taking out the trash or writing emails in your 9-to-5 job or something. Like, you're not, this is why most people make it to, like midlife or beyond and still have no idea who they want to be when they grow up, right? Because they never spent the time at a younger age to sit down and go through the deeper introspective work to find actual clarity on what they want to do and who they want to be when they grow up.
Now, that's kind of hard when you're in the day-to-day rut and going through the same motions every day. Yeah. Even for business planning, I sometimes get my best ideas on location or when I'm up in an airplane, change of scenery, change of environment.
Changing the environment is key. And I can give a couple of exercises to people right now. Like, if you feel like you don't have clarity in something, I'll give you guys a couple of exercises that I think will be really helpful. These are going to be in my book, Shit You Don't Learn in College, when it comes out later this year. But one of the exercises that we do with people, I call it finding your joy, right? So the Dalai Lama says, if you're ever feeling lost and you don't know where to go, follow your joy, right? You can use it as a compass to figure out where you want to go. And for a lot of people, I tell everybody, following your joy can actually be difficult for some people because sometimes following your joy, like Mike, like you and I were just talking about, sometimes following your joy is on the other side of fear, right? There's fear or an excuse that is preventing you from following your joy. You know that this thing brings you joy and happiness, but you have some fear or some excuse that's preventing you from making that decision and following it. So the exercise that I tell everybody to do, it's a really simple exercise, takes about 10, 15 minutes. The first thing that you do is just write down 20 things that you love to do. 20 things that you love to do. Don't think about it too much. You take about 5-10 minutes to write down 20 things that you love to do. And if I were to not think about it right now, what comes to the top of my mind is, I love doing interviews like this with great people like Mike. I love kissing and hugging my wife. I love playing with my dog. I love a glass of nice tequila. I love teaching others. I love reading a good book. I love watching movies, right? So you don't have to think about it too much. Just write down the things that you love to do. I love to travel, right? Now, once you take about 5-10 minutes to write down 20 things you love to do, right afterwards, go back and next to each one, write down why. So what you're trying to do here is you're trying to find the deeper function behind the form, right? Reading a good book is a form. What is the function behind that? I love to learn, right? Traveling is a form. What is the function behind that? I love to explore and expand myself and my horizons. Kissing and hugging my wife is a form. What is the function behind that? I love to connect to people on a deeper level, right? So you go deep and you find out, why do you love to do all of these things? And once you have the 20 whys, go glance through them all. And every single person we've worked with, we've now worked with over 1,000 people who've done this exercise, and we've given them direct feedback on this. Every single person has somewhere between 3 to 5 paradigms that run through their life. 3 to 5 paradigms that bring them the deepest joy. So for me, for example, when I do this exercise, it comes down to, I love to grow. I love to teach and empower others. I love to connect in a deep and meaningful way. And what's the last one? I love to go out. And I love to be present. So I love to just be present and in the moment. Those are the 4 things that like run as paradigms through my life. And the more that I live a life with those 4 things, the more I'm fulfilled and happy and accomplished. Now, the first time I did this exercise, it was before I quit Cisco. And when I did it and I looked at my job at Cisco, the question then becomes, well, how much of my life that I'm living currently am I able to align with these 4 things? And while I was working at Cisco, the answer was maybe 20% on a good week. But now I'd say probably 95%. So it becomes very clear, like if you're living a life that does not allow you to align with the things that bring you joy on a more regular basis, you need to figure out how to make that aligned.
Yeah, finding your why. I think that's really big. And the things that you love to do, I like to even take it a step further and say, now those things that you love to do, once you know what those are, what you're good at or what you enjoy, what brings you joy, how can that be used to serve others or to help other people? And that's kind of connecting the dots, because I do believe that we all have different spiritual
that's
gifts,
literally
right?
That's literally the next step in my book is like we help people get clear on this.
Okay.
And then we help them connect the dots to, okay, how do we connect that to what people want and need in the world so you can actually create a career out of it?
Exactly. And there's things, if you're listening to this, you don't know what the things are. It could be simple things like Zander said. And there's things that really come easy to you that to somebody else could be something that they struggle with. I mean, if you talk a lot and you got a loud voice, you might be great at like being a tour guide or showing things. Like there's so many ways to connect the dots. I'm excited.
And one of the best ways to find that, by the way, because a lot of, like you mentioned, like you might not even notice that you're good at it. So I always tell people to pick 3 to 5 people that you know and trust. 3 is probably the best number. You don't have to go to 5. Pick 3 people that you know, love, and trust, and ask them, hey, what do I do like that's easy for me that is actually difficult for a lot of other people? Like what am I really good at? And ask somebody else that knows you to tell you, because they'll tell you things that you're like, oh shit, I am really good at that. And I didn't really think about that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I figured out that I'm good at taking complicated information. A lot of experts will just over-explain things and make it confusing and scientific, and then I translate that and dumb it down to like a 7th grade level.
Yeah, that's a superpower. Like that's no joke, a superpower.
I'll take it. So let's talk a little bit about. We talked about stepping into the fear, and I just want to compare that to, especially during this kind of time we're in with COVID and politics, seems like there's always something going on. There's a lot of people living in this state of anxiety and worry, which I think that is something that's not serving, right? But then we also talked about fear, which stepping into that and having the stress and the demand. Like both you and I as high performers and running businesses and all the things that we have to do, we're definitely under a lot of stress. But it doesn't mean that we're worrying or having anxiety over it. So talk a little bit about the difference of those.
Well, you really just kind of hit on the nose, and I don't know if you did this consciously or unconsciously, but I actually separate stress and worry, like you mentioned. So one of the things that I love to tell people is like you and I, Mike, like we have very high demand careers. Not necessarily high stress, because the normal connotation of stress that most people have, they connotate stress with worry. Like stress and worry are synonymous when they actually aren't, right? Because there's eustress and distress. Those are 2 different types of stress. Eustress is demand that basically drives forward, drives action. It's positive stress. It creates growth. This is eustress. Distress is what most people think of when you say the term stress, which is actually close connotation with the term worry. It's basically negative thought processes going through our head, worrying about shit that hasn't even happened yet, or that's already happened and we can't control. It's either worrying about stuff in the future that hasn't happened or worrying about stuff in the past that's already happened and we can't control. It's already happened,
something that
right?
may never happen is purely imagination.
Right. So I can't remember. I think it's a Mark Twain quote. He says like 95% of our fears will never actually, come to fruition or something like that. So it's like, we're basically creating the issue by worrying about these things. And so, the thing that I tell people is like, the biggest distinguisher there is like, stress is not a bad thing, right? We're like strong by design. Like, how do you become strong?
You got to break down the muscles in the gym. You got to work harder.
You have to stress the muscle. You have to time under tension. Like you have to put it under duress. You have to put demand on your muscles. You do not grow your muscles without stress. That's literally like the definition of growth requires stress. So, when people say they want to have more, they want to have a better life, they want to make more money, they want to have more meaning, right? Well, you can't make more money, have more meaning, be more fulfilled without putting stress on yourself. You have to increase your demand to grow you as a person. Jim Rohn has that famous quote. He says, to have more, you have to become more, right? Well, to have more, you have to become more. And to become more, I have to grow. And growth and stress are synonymous. Then transitive property, I was an engineer, right? Transitive property, like stress is a good thing. Stress
creates diamonds. Also look at trees that need to grow. They need to get pruned and trimmed. And I think God will do that in our lives too. Set you through challenges or 100% obstacles on purpose just to trim off some of the stuff you don't need so that you can step into like greater things that are waiting for you. But 100%. It's not going to happen unless you go through that stress, some of those challenges.
Yeah. And I think, what ends up happening is we create distress in our life by worrying about, just like you mentioned, if we were this tree and we were getting our leaves trimmed, we create this, we're like, oh my God, my leaves, like this is the worst thing ever, because you don't see the bigger picture of like, I need my leaves trimmed so that I can grow bigger and taller. One of our mutual friends, Vince Del Monte, I love the analogy he uses of a grape seed, right? He said, like, if you were a grape seed that was destined to become an amazing, beautiful, sweet fruit, a grape, that was then destined to become a vintage wine, like one of the best delicacies that we could ever look forward to, right? But when you first start off, you're a seed planted in the ground, buried in the earth, cold, wet, dark, terrifying. So you fight your way up to like break through the ground and finally see daylight. And then you grow onto this beautiful vine. And finally you see the fruits of your labor and you create this delicious fruit, these grapes, only to have it ripped off your vine. And you're now ripped off the vine and thrown into a bucket and stomped all over and crushed to death and then thrown into a dark barrel and buried again for years. Right. And it's like, most people can't see that on the other side of being buried and on the other side of being crushed, there is a beautiful outcome. There is something amazing that is coming from this. So they sit in this moment of dark despair and worry the whole time, run through their head like, this is the worst thing ever. Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. Like, this sucks. Not realizing that, like, hey, if you just realize like, I must go through this to become a fruit, to become the vintage wine, and you accept that struggle is part of the process or the darkness is part of the process, you stop worrying.
I would take it a step further. Don't just accept it, embrace it.
Not even embrace it, seek it.
Right. Embrace the suck. Seek the suck.
Seek the, it's like accept it, then you embrace it, and then you actually seek it, because you know that like the more of that you get, the more beautiful the fruit that comes from it, right?